Hi everyone, welcome to our Insights webinar. So the focus of today really is primarily to share with you what we've called the Evolve Insights program. So how we've evolved our data inputs and use of data, and how we've evolved our reporting outputs in terms of our new dashboards. And then as part of that, the evolution of the Insights program, we're going to touch on and start to share some emerging results and insights from our consumer surveys. So if we first start by, if we jump into some slides, and if we start to share, firstly, I use the phrase there, Evolved Insights program. So firstly, the Insights program isn't new. It's always been available to our members. The key thing is, or the key phrase that I've used there is evolution. So we've evolved those data insights and evolved those inputs. So when I talk about the Insights program, it's really underpinned by these sort of 4 inputs that you can see on screen. These inputs very much designed to understand the full performance of the West End. So whether that be footfall and visitation, whether that be visitor behaviours and opinions, international travel data, or card transaction and spending trends. So first, maybe if I just step through a couple of these. The biggest change to the Insights program is our card transaction data. So we've moved from a consortium of participating members. So previously the Insights program was underpinned by around 80 retailers and brands across the district, sharing with us their transaction data. That was then anonymised, aggregated. We gave very granular insights to those 80 participating retailers and brands, but actually beyond those participating members, we couldn't share a great deal of detail. We could tell our members, you know, what the sales trends were and how that might split international versus domestic or by street. So now we have moved to, or swapped that input to MasterCard. So you can see on screen, firstly, you know, the 2 maps are showing data coverage. So we've massively enhanced the coverage of data that we are able to understand performance and drill into performance. So still reporting on sort of Oxford Street, Regent Street, Bond Street and Mayfair, but you can see that visual, you know, we're now understanding the performance for each and every store that accepts a MasterCard, pretty much everyone across the district. Beyond that, actually the beauty of the MasterCard data is that we're actually able to go beyond our district and look at data for Greater London and understand how you know, retailers and brands or venues are performing outside of the district. So for example, we can benchmark versus you know, Canary Wharf, the Westfields, the City of London, and so on, to add additional context in terms of that performance. So there you can see on screen that map to show that coverage. Other ways in which we've enhanced the data, so footfall and visitation. I think the most familiar insights that we put out is the email from Archam on a Monday and Thursday that tells you how visitation has trended over the current or previous week. We're continuing to do that. We're continuing to use camera-based technology to do that and share those insights as quickly as possible. But actually that data doesn't tell us, you know, how have dwell times increased or decreased, how have visit frequencies increased or decreased. So we've invested in mobility data to really enhance that core underlying camera-based technology that gives us the footfall visitation. Another element that we have improved, and I'll come on and talk about this shortly, is our understanding of visitor behaviours and opinions. So historically, you know, we've always done this, but we were reliant on sort of 2 waves of surveying that I describe as sort of peak and off-peak. So summer months, you know, November, December, Christmas months, where we would do surveying work across the district to get those visitor behaviours and opinions. You know, that was typically 2-week periods, so 4 weeks out of 52, so quite a narrow lens in which to understand those behaviours and opinions. We're now rolling out, or that we have rolled that out, to survey each and every month, so a much broader understanding of those behaviours and opinions and how that changes sort of seasonally and as we move through the year. The final sort of pillar or lens of which we try and understand and pick apart West End performance is international. So clearly we're an international centre. International arrivals, hotel bookings, hotel occupancy are a key indicator of performance for the district. Not a lot of change here, other than the way in which we present and the depth that we can share with members. So, you know, we sit on a lot of flight booking data into London airports. What's the origin of those bookings, both regionally, nationally, and what are we seeing in terms of a 3-month time horizon looking forward? So who is coming, and you know, what clues can that give around future performance? So changes in terms of the inputs, but also quite significant, very significant changes in terms of the outputs. So you'll all be used to receiving a monthly report where, you know, we've crunched the data and we've picked apart, you know, the performance and the key drivers of that performance. You know, that probably gives you, you know, a good coverage of understanding. You know, we probably for 90% of you answer most of your questions, but actually by handing the data over in terms of delivering it also via dashboards means that actually you can delve into the data, you can slice into the data yourselves, you can, for example, do a cut, create a chart, put it into your own reporting. So the first sort of focus of today's session is really to bring that to life. So I'm sort of going to bring Arch on in here, where we're going to go live and look at the dashboards and talk through those and demonstrate how you can self-serve and play around and get your hands on the data yourselves.
All right, thank you, Paddy, for the introduction. And there's nothing like a live demo. And instead of showing you just you know, static slides, we'd like to go over to our website, and you see the website link in front of you that will allow you to access these insights. Now, this is the live demonstration of our Insights portal on our website. You can log into it by going into newwestend.com and clicking the Insights login link in your top right-hand corner. So once you get access to this portal, you will be able to have a look at all of our historical reports, including some of the dashboards that Paddy has talked about today. The report I want to showcase to you is the monthly Insights report. The latest one we have here is for July 2024. So if you click on that report, you shall be able to log in and access the live data. Now, Paddy, where shall we begin today? Where would you want to take our audience?
I think probably the journey that, you know, we might take when we're compiling the report. So really, I think Archie maybe explaining the landing page and why we've designed it in the way, and then we can almost step through and demonstrate the underlying detail.
Of course. So as Paddy mentioned, we begin at the executive summary. We believe this is almost like a one-stop shop for your understanding of the West End performance in a given month. So here is the data for July 2024 with the key drivers of commercial retail performance. We start with sales, footfall, transaction volumes, and ATV, leveraging both the footfall data we get from the cameras that Paddy mentioned and the MasterCard data.
And Archie, I suppose in a way this looks, you know, this could be a static report. So I think probably starting to demonstrate that even on this high level page, the interactive nature in terms of how you might drill into this data.
Yes, indeed. These are not static images or PDF files. This is actually live data. So underneath each of the metrics, for example, you can see a chart, and if you hover over things, you can actually see the data as you move through the last 12 months of data. Additionally, you can click any of the buttons here. For example, if you want to understand the origin splits of sales, you can click the origin split, and you will see again a chart highlighting that. You can also right-click on any chart and show things as a table, which will give you a bigger chart, which you can take with you, but also the actual numbers that sit behind this data set. And you can interact this way with any of the charts and with any of the data you see before you in this report. There are more, examples of, interactive functionality as we will go through the reports, including filters and so on, which we'll demonstrate a bit later.
Okay, and then I suppose, Artem, what if I was only really focused on a specific category or a specific street, and I wanted to be able to, I know how I as a retailer has performed, actually maybe sort of demonstrate how that retailer might want to benchmark their performance?
Of course. So here on the left-hand side, you will see a menu of different pages within this report. So currently we are on the executive summary, but if you go into the second page, spend overview, you will get a deeper dive into West End performance. And on the top right-hand side, you will, for example, see spend by category page, which is exactly what you mentioned, Paddy. If you click into that, you will see all of the retail and leisure and F&B categories. All the businesses within the West End, which we cover, fall into one of these categories. So, for example, general merchandise includes things like department stores, consumer electronics, self-explanatory, and so on. And you will be able to see here performance for all the key metrics of spend. So, total value of spend, ATV, and transaction volumes. There are other metrics here that you can break down that spend by country of origin of the customers, as well as the street. So there's a lot to dig into here, and you can also filter quite a lot of this data, for example, using the drop-down menus or toggles, if you want to see, for example, on this chart, the international versus domestic performance.
And I think maybe, Artem, sort of keeping on this slide, one of the interesting things is, particularly on that USA piece, understanding actually what does a US consumer spend on category-wise versus, say, someone from the Middle East or the UAE. I think that profile is particularly interesting.
Yes, indeed. So here on the country category spend distribution, you can see how customers from different countries spend. So a US customer, for example, tends to spend on hotels, restaurants, retail, much less on leisure, bars, or groceries. But if you, for example, select a drop down for someone from Saudi Arabia, you will see a much bigger proportion of total spend on retail, much less on hotels, restaurants. So that's a different visitor profile. You can also toggle the button here to see the historical trend. And again, you can filter for categories or for countries of origin.
Okay. In my introduction, I sort of mentioned the ability to benchmark performance so that we can now look beyond the district. Is it worth just pointing out on the previous dashboard, that data, and it really brings to life the context that we can now provide.
Indeed. So this is not just a report on West End performance, and we can actually see how the West End is doing versus its benchmark competitors. And when we talk about benchmark competitors, we mean the ones like Westfields, City of London, Canary Wharf, Knightsbridge. So the top retail destinations across London. And here on this page, you can see the performance of the West End versus the benchmark competitors, both year on year or year to date. So if you flip over to the year on year performance, we can see that the West End in July was up 1% year on year, while benchmark competitors were down 1.4%. So as you look at West End's performance, it's often difficult to estimate whether a certain number is good or bad. And this kind of benchmark gives you an ability to actually gauge that.
Okay. And maybe just going back to that international sort of theme, we can see on there, the domestic and international split by month. But Artem, that there's more detail on that international theme. So is it worth drilling into that?
Yes, indeed. There is a button here on spend by country, and you can see all the key spend metrics by international versus domestic consumers. But you can also see things like distribution of spend, and also performance for each of the top spending nationalities. So here, for example, at the bottom, you have a chart of country spends for UAE. You'll see there was quite a significant growth this year, double-digit growth in most of the months. But if you flip over, for example, to Italy to see what performance was like for more European country, again, very strong growth over the past year, slowing down slightly in July, but still quite robust. And also here on the bottom right-hand side, you are able to see the ATV, so average transaction value for each country in July. You see the ones like UAE, Saudi, Kuwait outperforming both the average and some of the other nationalities in terms of the average spend across the West End.
Okay. I guess now probably to highlight the street level performance. So if we wanted to really, rather than a category or an international consumer, if we want to really just focus on a street.
Yeah. Another link here leads to the spend by street data. And here we will look at the component parts of the West End, Oxford Street, Regent Street, Bond Street, and the West End as a whole. So you're able to see, the breakdown between international and domestic, average transaction values, but also interestingly, which countries perform in each street. So this is an interesting chart here. If you want to examine the data closely, you're able to see that on Regent Street, Emirati and Qatari and Saudi customers spend quite a bit. In some cases, even more than they do on Bond Street, highlighting the various retail mix each of the streets offer. And there is more data on this page for performance by different location.
And we can see there, obviously, for each of the streets, whether it be Bond Street or Oxford Street, that the international is a key component in terms of share of spend. This is telling us kind of what has happened. We quite often get questions around what might the next few months look like. So, Archam, is it worth jumping into, again, that international element and showing some of the forward-looking travel data that we have?
Yes, so on the left-hand side in the menu, if you click on this little plane icon for international travel, you will be able to see the insights we have for flight arrivals into London. So this includes all London airports from any origin markets across the globe. You're able to see for the given month the volume of passengers compared to last year, as well as statistics like average length of stay, average lead booking time, and others. Interestingly enough, because this is a live bookings database, we are able to see not just what happened in the past, but as you mentioned, what's going to happen in the future. Yeah. This is not a forecast. This is actual bookings as they currently stand compared to the same time last year. So this is like for like forward bookings for example, as we look from July into August, September, and October. And as we release new reports, we will be able to provide data then for November, December, and so on. So you will see here, for example, that there was, expected significant growth in August, more subdued growth in September. But you can dig underneath those numbers and see, okay, what's driving that trend in September. So if you split, for example, this data by region, you'll see that even though at an overall level, flight arrivals are quite flat, you'll see that, for example, the ones like GCC countries are still seeing significant growth in arrivals, which could be a significant indicator for retailers to cater to those audiences. Sure.
I probably should have said at the start, please put questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try and cover those off. Plan was really to answer those at the end, but Archam, a couple have come through that probably make sense to answer now. So maybe we just jump to the front page again. We had a question around what the metrics are in terms of, are they year on year, month on month? And I think the real focus, largely when we produce a report, is that it's July versus 24 versus 23. So what are we seeing year on year? But you can see in that time series box at the bottom of the chart, that's where you can see the month on month trends. We also had a question in terms of when is the report published? So it is typically sort of around the 23rd-ish of the month, dependent on when we receive the MasterCard data. But if you use that as the expected delivery, could be a couple of days before, it could be a couple of days after. We've got some other questions that are coming through that we can touch on at the end.
So shall we explore a bit more about visitor insights now?
Yes.
So on the, again, left-hand menu, you can see the icon for visitor insights. And this includes the quite hopefully familiar footfall data that was supplied to you every week, just aggregated for that whole month. You're able to see footfall month on month and year on year trends, as well as daily trends for for that given month. You can also click a button here to overlay spend data, so you can compare how footfall and spend acted, whether in concert or with an opposing trend. And as Paddy mentioned, we have significantly enhanced this data. We are still using the camera-based technology to track footfall data, so it's real live visitors to the district, but we're also enhancing it with mobility data, which gives us an opportunity to highlight things like average dwell time and average visit frequency. So here you can see both the trends of average dwell time versus the previous July in this particular report. But if you click a toggle here, you're also able to access the raw number. So average dwell time in July was slightly under 2.5 hours, while average visit frequency was 3.3 times a year. And at the bottom, you are able to see the same metrics of frequency, footfall, and dwell time for each of these streets.
Okay, and then maybe just to wrap up the dashboard element of the session, maybe it's worth just showing how, if you are more focused on specific street, how we can pull all of this together into a one pager that covers that off.
Yes, indeed. So the last menu item here includes the street overview, which essentially is a one-stop shop for those members who are interested in a particular street performance. So here you have all the metrics combined on a single page for Oxford Street, but here on the top right-hand corner, you can see a drop-down where you can select other areas, like, for example, Bond Street, in which case it will highlight all the main metrics for Bond Street. Things like footfall, spend, dwell time, ATV, catchments, domestic catchments, origin of visitors, etc.
Yeah, and Artem, I'm conscious that this is the first view where we've seen the map. Is it worth explaining what the green and red is representing on that map?
So the highlighted areas here in the map is the West End catchment, or in this particular case, the Bond Street catchment, because we are on the Bond Street page. This is where 90% of visitors to Bond Street come from. And the areas highlighted in red and green simply demonstrate where we have seen an increase or decrease in penetration in terms of incoming visitors for that month compared to the previous month.
Yeah, obviously it's a UK map, so that's just the UK, the domestic element of visitation. Obviously Bond Street also has that international as well. Okay, so that's obviously the dashboards. We are going to have a Q&A at the end. There have been some additional questions that have come through. Another element that I mentioned in my introduction was the consumer survey. So the new surveying went live in June and has continued in each and every month. And so we just wanted to share some emerging insights in terms of that data. In the report that comes out, or the monthly report that comes out this month, there will be an additional report attached to that email report that will go into the visitor survey in a bit more detail. So this is really just to show some emerging insights from that. So firstly, in terms of our approach to consumer surveying and understanding the visitors to the West End, a big change in the way in which we're looking at that is how we segment either reasons to visit. So we recognise that the West End serves a multitude of visit reasons. The bulk of value in the district is created by those that come shopping. How do those shoppers behave? What are their likes, dislikes? What would they like to see more of that would attract new or more trips? We segment and we're able to look at just shoppers. And then you can see on screen other ways in which we're sort of segmenting and drilling into the data to understand sort of the mindset and behavioural information of, for example, a worker, of someone that comes for sort of culture and leisure, of someone that comes for social reasons. So you'll see us talking about these visit segments or these types of visitors in a bit more detail. The other thing that we've introduced that is new to our understanding of the consumer is the introduction of the Mosaic segmentation. So for those that are not familiar with Mosaic segmentation, this is where we split UK consumers into one of 15 groups, very much based upon sort of age, affluence and life stage. So we can understand, again, demographically, are there other commonalities around the way in which certain demographic groups behave. We can, by doing that, also understand, are there certain demographic groups that are under penetrated? So are there certain groups that do or don't come to the West End? And again, by understanding that, we can tie back to geographically, where do these individuals live? Is there things that we can do to drive increased engagement across the district? So very much sort of segmenting the consumer. And then we've always segmented by location as well. So this is very much the way in which we're splitting up our analysis and our understanding of West End visitors. You pick that apart by these segments, it gives you clues on how you might then drive future performance. So a handful of slides here really to start sharing these insights. So the dashboards were very much focused on spend. What we've got here is the visitors. So when we've stopped and spoken to people, it's highlighted around 55% are domestic visitors, 45 are international visitors. But what you can see on the right there is the nuances by street. So actually Oxford Street, much more domestic bias. Regent Street, Mayfair at the extreme end, and Bond Street, more international bias. Where are those international visitors coming from? So actually one of the things that we've introduced in the surveying is that we now do it across more languages. So we survey people in 5 languages across the district. That returned responses from around 91 different nationalities across the district. So we're really getting a good understanding of those visitor perceptions from those international visitors. And you can see that broken down by, France, Germany, United States, Italy, the Netherlands, in terms of the top 5 there. It was a very long list. So I sort of mentioned those 91 different nationalities picked up in the survey. Age profile. So we understand the age of visitors to the district. So the red bars on the top left chart there is the visitor profile. So a third of visitors to the district are aged 35 to 44. So a relatively young visitor profile, particularly when you put that in the context of the draw of trade domestically. It's very, very high penetration rates in terms of the proportion of residents across the catchment. It's about half the rate in terms of that penetration of 35 to 44-year-olds. And again, we're starting to pick apart, Regent Street, Oxford Street, typically slightly younger profile. Mayfair, Bond Street, slightly older profile. I introduced Mosaic. So there is a report, as I said, coming out sort of in the next monthly delivery, which could likely to be the end of this week, early next week. There'll be more detail in terms of what is Mosaic, how do you interpret it, how do you understand that profile. Really the key outtake is that the West End visitor profile domestically is very heavily skewed to the most affluent Mosaic types. So City Prosperity, for example, nearly 27% of the visitors versus around 19% of that catchment that Artem showed in the dashboard. That's the core visitor, but actually, what clues does the data give us in terms of potential? Is there room for growth for certain visitor types? So what we've highlighted on here is, yes, City Prosperity, core domestic visitor type. but actually things like prestige positions, domestic success, affluent consumer groups, but actually we underpenetrate this consumer type. We could be doing more to attract them, and the report that comes out in the next week or so will have more information about this consumer type, where they reside in the UK, for example, how might you target them geographically and so on, because actually you would expect more of them within the district given their presence within the catchment. So that was a very quick sort of overview on who is visiting. And if we now start to drill into, why are people visiting? So, unsurprisingly, shopping is the dominant reason to visit. Ranges depending on what street you're on. Mayfair, about 35 or a third of visitors are there specifically to shop. So this is the main reason. We recognise that there will be other reasons why people visit, but if you were to focus on that main reason to visit, it ranges from almost like a third to almost 2/3. So the likes of Regent Street and Bond Street, you're much more likely to, if you stop someone, said, "What's the main reason you're here?" It's shopping. And then you can see some of the other reasons that we pick up, we understand. So work, business and study, around sort of between 10 and 15%, 17% of visitors. And these are, in a way, engaged visitors, those that are specifically on those streets, that have stopped and spoken to us in terms of their visit reasons. And then other reasons, so culture and leisure, that could be sort of eating out and visiting cultural institutions or more leisure-led operators. Social reasons, this is where someone has specified to us that actually they're in the district, they're in and around the street to meet family and friends, to meet colleagues, to meet and essentially socialise. And then there'll be other reasons, such as more practical reasons around sort of using services and so on. So that's the visit reason. I think what you can see there is Mayfair actually has the most varied visit mix. That's very much predominantly, once you move into the Mayfair area, you're starting to pick up a lot more of those other offers beyond that core shopping retail offer. So that's main reason for being on the street. And actually, as I said on the previous slide, we recognise that most people have more than one reason to be in the district, or they might have more than one activity that they partake in when they're in the district. So this is starting to understand linked trips, and what you can see there, and the reason why we're doing this is to really pick apart value and drivers of value across the district. So someone that comes in for shopping, it really jumps out that actually shopping is really aligned also with that culture or leisure led trip, that if you were to describe shopping, describe sort of that retail led, so the brands have brought them in, but actually I also want to commit some of my time to a more leisure led day out activity, the eating out and so on. 85% of shoppers state that they partake in cultural and leisure activities as well, 12% social. Contrast that to something like work, business and study. Actually, if you're coming into work, actually you've got the lowest likelihood to actually engage with the retail offer or the shopping offer. So around 13% of those that are their main reason to be in the district is work, business and study. Only 13% of workers are engaging in the retail or shopping activity. But culture and leisure, primarily, eating out in terms of the leisure-led bit, workers, that's where their secondary engagement in the district comes from. And then you can see how that contrasts for someone whose main reason to visit is culture and leisure, or main reason is for social activities. So touching on or remaining on those sort of the activities and interaction with different offers, obviously we are a retail-led district. Actually, what about that retail engagement? So, a lot of the time, you ask someone to guess, how many retailers do you think a shopper typically engages with or visits on a trip? And actually, a lot of people are quite surprised to find out that, it's somewhere between typically 3 and 4 retailers or brands that they might sort of plan to interact with or do interact with. And so that sort of comes through on here that, on average, a shopper engages or visits around 3.2 retailers. Clearly, that will fluctuate seasonally. But what really jumps out is that opportunity for other main reasons to visit. So, the workers, very low retailer engagement. Actually, there's a huge opportunity there to engage more workers to interact with the retail offer, and so on. So this is, I sort of mentioned on the intro, the continuous consumer monitoring. This is something that we will track over time, is how is retailer engagement evolving across visit reasons, but also how is retailer engagement just generally tracking in terms of, as the retail mix evolves in and around the district, are we seeing increased retailer engagement across any of the segments or all of the segments combined? So it's another way to really track performance. Why is it important to track this, and how does it link through to performance? It's because actually driving increased retailer engagement drives sales, drives conversion. So, for example, if you look at someone going from 2 to 3 retailers to 3 to 4 retailers, their propensity to spend increases by around 14%. Get them to go from 3 to 4 to 4 to 5, that propensity goes up another 2%. Get them to go from 4 to 5 to 5 to 6, it increases by another 2%. So really tracking and understanding the engagement of a consumer with the retail mix, our core proposition in the district, is a good way of again measuring performance across the district and relating that through to sort of conversion and spend. And then again, how does that shopper profile or spend mix or spend profile evolve or differ across those visit reasons? So the dashboards that we showed you, they're very much focused on that MasterCard spend, and we can slice and dice that by trading categories. But actually what the consumer survey allows us to do is slice and dice spending by reasons to visit. So, looking at the spend on a given MasterCard doesn't tell us that actually that person was there to work, or it doesn't tell us that actually that person was there for social reasons. And this is where we start to blend data sets to start to get a more holistic view on actually visit reasons. How does that impact the spend profile? And again, I think the two that I always call out on this, or the two to really contrast, is that difference between a shopper and a worker, in terms of the dominance of the retail spend for a shopper versus the dominance of a F&B spend for a worker. And are there opportunities there to grow spend in retail for workers and actually grow spend in F&B for shoppers? So it's about sort of understanding potential and opportunities, and again really starting to blend characteristics together. So what we've got here, and other data sets that we collect, are characteristics around annual visits by visit reason. That starts to allow us to really quantify the total value of a visitor segment. So shoppers, unsurprisingly, when they come into the district on a trip, they spend the most. They come around 8 times per year. So, we estimate that, a West End shopper, probably on an individual basis, generates around sort of £2,360, per year. Extrapolate that through to visit volumes and so on. We estimate that, unsurprisingly, a shopper or shoppers generate around 54%, or more than half of the value generated across the district. But what about other groups? And actually, I think what's interesting on this slide is that if you pick things like work, business or study, so the workers, yes, they don't spend a lot when they are in. So they've got the lowest spend. They spend around £18 per trip, but they come a lot. So actually that actually means that they annually generate a lot of value. So actually more annualized value than a shopper. So actually, if you could get or grow the the worker population. So we're seeing a lot of new developments, particularly in and around Oxford Street. The addition of each and every worker that permanently is, a permanent West End worker, and I don't necessarily mean 5 days. I mean, they might come in 3 days and so on. On an annual basis, adding workers into the mix, adding workers into the district, disproportionately drives up value across the district when compared to, say, a shopper. I think the other interesting take on this is the value of the culture leisure-led trip. So those that say they're coming for sort of culture and leisure, actually they potentially, or they do come in more frequently than, say, a shopper, which means that, again, that annualized visitation, that's a valuable driver of spend, a valuable driver of growth for the district. And again, is that a key focus area, because actually those that say they do that activity, they also go on and spend across all spending categories. So that's really just starting to pick apart and build upon our understanding of sort of value creation across the district. So we touched on sort of things like retailers visited, and I also mentioned at the start how we can start to segment around sort of the component parts of the West End. And I think when you talk about West End performance, we quite often will break it down into Regent Street, Oxford Street, Mayfair, those component parts. But actually, the West End is one, and what the data is allowing us to track and understand is visitation across districts. So, if I'm on Regent Street or I speak to a shopper on Regent Street, actually about 76% of visitors to Regent Street also visited Oxford Street, 22% also planned or did go on to visit Mayfair, 50% went on to also visit or plan to visit Bond Street. So, the West End is about, it's complementary, not competitive component parts. And again, this is something that we're going to track and understand. Are we seeing more engagement across districts or across those component parts? Again, why is that important to understand, or why might you pick that apart? Because actually, the more that happens, the more a typical visitor spends. So, a West End visitor that only visits one, of Regent Street, Oxford Street, Mayfair or Bond Street have the lowest spend. So typically spends around £72. Get them to 2 or 3 of those venues, you're driving their length of stay, you're driving their dwell time, you're probably driving engagement across categories. What you can see on the right there is that £72, they go to 2, grows to 136, they go to 3, grows to 193 pounds. You get them to, really spend a day in the West End, go across all those component parts, you get a significant uplift in spend. So again, it's important to understand this, but through our continuous consumer monitoring, these are the types of things that, we'll start to understand and pick apart on a monthly basis. How has cross visitation developed and grown month on month, year on year? And then finally, sort of starting to understand sort of the value creation beyond the tills that are located in the West End. So we're starting to pick apart and try and understand almost like the halo effect or the value on digital in the West End. So, understandably, I think we recognise that the role of the store is evolving, whether it's in the West End or whether it's in a different location. And a big driver of that evolution is digital, whether that's fulfillment, returns, click and collect, customer acquisition, driving sales online through Brand Showcase, for example. So these are metrics that we are starting to track across the district. So, for example, in June, around 3% of visitors actually used the store estates or used the brands across the district to return an online purchase. That's not something that we would probably pick up in the MasterCard data. But for those brands or for those consumers, there was a value associated with that. The ease of being able to return potentially near your place of work, that could have been that driver to purchase online. So, there's an inherent value that is being generated online there. Likewise, the use of click and collect in June, around 6% of the visitors that we spoke to were picking items up we can't track that transaction in the MasterCard data. It happens in a centralized location, but actually the West End store helped facilitate and deliver that value. So for those 6% that took part in that. And then sort of finally, the brand showcase or the customer acquisition and the physical location potentially driving a future online performance. 16% of visitors that we spoke to in this wave of the research actually saw something in the West End, in a store in the West End, that actually they planned to purchase online at a later date. So yeah, these are new metrics that we recognise are important, because the West End and the presence of the store in the West End is creating value beyond the West End. So you'll start to see us reference these types of metrics on a monthly basis to help sort of track how do some of these things change over time. For example, I can't wait to see some of these returned online purchases or use click and collect post Black Friday, post Cyber Monday, to really highlight the role that the West End, the physical element of the West End, drives in that digital peak that we will see around that trading period. So that was the consumer research. A lot of new insights there, but as I say, we are starting to track on a monthly basis. So time now really for Q&A. So I think we had a couple that came through as we went through the slides. It looks like we have had a couple more that have come through as we've been on the call. I'm sure I think some of these came through when we were talking about the consumer research. So first, one of the questions was F&B within leisure. I think in that report, yes, we included food service as part of the leisure-led trip. If what's your main reason to be here, there are a host of specific reasons. One of them is, I'm primarily here to eat out. We classified that as a leisure-led trip. I think within the dashboards and within the MasterCard data, you will see a food service line. So slightly different answers depending on whether it's the core spending data or how we are describing the visit reason. Better question, where can I access the consumer survey presentations? I can't see it in the portal. That's because this is essentially a sneak peek. So what I've shown you there is some insights for a report that will come out in line with the August delivery of the monthly report. So the dashboard that Archam took you through will get updated probably around probably at the earliest on Friday, potentially on Monday. When that gets updated, you will have a new monthly narrative that will arrive in your inbox, where we summarize elements of this report. We'll summarize, if there are elements of the consumer research that we can highlight as helped drive performance in August. And then in this August deliverable in your inbox, you'll also have a link to the consumer research, which is a slightly more in-depth report to what I've shown on screen there. We also had another question, which was around, and again, linking back to the dashboard. I think this came through when we were presenting the dashboards. Is there a more micro view that the brands can compare against, specifically their category or street? So maybe Archam, if we could jump back in the dashboard. I think we probably did demonstrate some of that as we went through the report. So I think possibly there could have been an underlying reason for this question. So we had a conversation with a member this morning. It was more around price position. So I don't know if that was driving the reason behind that question. So there are limitations in how granular we can go on the MasterCard data. Essentially, those restrictions are there to protect, for those merchants that are on the call, your individual underlying performance as an individual brand. So we can't go too granular on a street, or we can't go too granular on, for example, luxury. But I think probably what you can pick apart is there are, clear nuances across Bond Street, Oxford Street, and Regent Street. So if you were an apparel retailer and you wanted to understand how a certain, how's luxury comparing to more mass market, you might want to sort of potentially compare across streets that, compare luxury to more mass market. You might want to, compare Regent Street to Oxford Street, for example. We can't drill into luxury certain categories on, for example, Bond Street, because of those restrictions on the data. So yeah, in terms of other questions, I think there was a question around the theme of international coverage for MasterCard. So it is a global payments provider. They will have different market shares, the US through to Asia, through to Australia. We make sure that we pick up the key spending countries. So what you will see each month is if those that have contributed the most significant spend, they've made it into the top 10 in a given month. There was a question specifically about China. Does MasterCard cover China? MasterCard does cover China, and we do get Chinese spend as well. It won't always feature in the top 10, but we do have the ability to look at Chinese spending through MasterCard as well. So we've got about 9 minutes left. I don't know if there are any more questions. I think one of the real purpose of this sort of webinar is to drive this engagement with the dashboards and make people aware of a lot of data is available to you, particularly those members that previously weren't what we call a participating member, those that were sharing spending data with New West End Company. This has opened up a treasure trove of data to them, whether you're a landlord, whether you're what we call a non-participating member. The key for us is that, yes, we will send you that monthly narrative on a monthly basis, but we're really keen to drive engagement on these dashboards. The beauty of dashboards is that we've built these bespoke for the district, and if there are questions around, I wish it had this functionality, please reach out to myself, to Archam, and we will listen. And if there's common questions, we can look to adapt or evolve these further to meet the needs of the users across the district. So yeah, I don't know, Archam, anything else to add?
Well, when can people expect the next iteration report? You mentioned late this week or early next week.
Yeah, I think that will be the regular deliverable. So a number of these data sets come through at various stages throughout the month. Some we get relatively early. You see the frequency of update that you get from Archam in terms of footfall. It's worth noting there is a separate footfall dashboard which is always being updated. The final sort of data set that we await to do the monthly report is that MasterCard data. It's the biggest, most in-depth data set, which I always say, we'll have received that, crunched that data by around sort of the mid-20th something, so somewhere around sort of 23rd to 25th of the month. You can expect that email to come out with the summary, and then if you click the link in that email, or if you proactively went onto the New West End Company Insights portal, you would see the August report there around that date.
Yeah, I think that's the key here, is that to look out for the next report in the next coming days. And just if you haven't got it in your inbox, please, you can still visit the website or contact one of us, and we'll be sure to support you with any insights needs that might not be covered in this dashboard. The intention is for this to cover a multitude of needs, and we realize that different retailers will have different focuses. So if you have questions that go beyond what we built for you, please do not hesitate to get in touch with myself or Paddy or the wider team, and we can set up a more one-to-one bespoke call to discuss this.
Great. So I think that's everything from myself and Archam, and hopefully we'll look at the usage stats next week and see lots of people logging on and using the dashboards.
Yes, indeed. The purpose of this is to serve you, so please use it, please ask questions, and hopefully that helps drive spend and performance and other benefits to your brand and to the district. So thank you very much. Thank you, Paddy, for this walkthrough, and then this is the end, and thank you very much.